let's go through the key areas in the connect step first. The first key number 1, is to make a connection. The second key is to establish the personality type. And if you've been going through our communication training, you should already know how to identify personality types. And again, as I said in that training, do the best you can when you're new. I've been doing this 10 years. It's second nature to me. It's going to take you a while to get there. But do the best you can. It will serve you. It'll be nice for you, even if you get it wrong, to be thinking about what that person is and where they fit. The third key is determining the next step in the process. Now, I talked at length so far on the develop and introduce step. And this is where you determine, is this contact in the develop step or in the introduce step? So key number 1, make a connection. Now, this has been referred so many different ways. I've heard getting the contact to open up to you. I've heard this described as developing rapport, whatever. It doesn't matter what you call it. At the end of the day, if the person you're talking to is giving you one-word answers and they're not real open to you, you don't have to be doing this for 10 years like me to know that you haven't really made a connection with the person. And just think in day-to-day life. Sometimes you bump into somebody on the street, you say something to them, they give you a one-word answer, they don't say a whole lot. That's somebody you really haven't made a connection with. Sometimes you need to ask questions. Sometimes you just need to pay attention to what they're doing. Sometimes you just need to listen to them for a while before you make a connection. What I find the most important thing is when you're making a connection, and this generally is the biggest issue when you have somebody that you don't know, is the ability to ask questions. And there's another part of our communication training that deals specifically with asking questions. So I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on how to ask questions, but I will tell you making a connection and getting somebody to open up is accomplished by being able to ask questions, to listen, talk less. That means 90% listening, 10% talking. Why even 10%? Because you're asking questions. Now, use your common sense here. If they start offering information and they start opening up to you, that's when you've determined you've made a connection and you do want to talk a little bit more. You want to have a meaningful back and forth conversation and don't get stuck in the drilling them feeling. And that often happens when you get stuck in the asking questions mode and you ask question after question after question and the person feels interrogated. But if you're really interested and you're listening to them and you have an understanding of what they're saying, or you don't understand what they're saying and you ask clarifying questions, people will really feel like you're listening to them. And that's where making a connection is huge, is asking those questions. So as you're going through this training, if you go out there and you find that your trouble is establishing a connection, then you definitely want to focus on taking our asking questions part of the communication training. The second key is establishing the personality type. And, you know, I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this because this is one of those things that, you know, I talked at length about in the personality training, but basically we have our red, blue, green, and yellows. And the reason why this is important in establishing is as you're going through the communication process, it's going to help you deal with each person in a specific way. And again, if you get it wrong, it doesn't matter. Most people don't think about this in the communication process in their daily life, and they're still successful in what they do. At the end of the day, what brings success? It's doing something, getting people through a process, doing day-to-day work. So don't get hung up on this, but also think, you know, this is something that I want to work on. And so once you know what their personality type is, that's going to carry you through the rest of this communication process, because as we progress through develop, introduce, follow up, and close, there's going to be different ways of saying things and different scripts that'll offer depending on who you're dealing with. The last key in the connect step is determining the next step. And again, I talked a lot about this earlier on. This is the most important step, I think, in the overall connecting process. This is a key because if you don't determine what step you're going to be using, whether it be develop or introduce, you're going to get that weird feeling again where I said something and this just didn't feel right, or my contact just gave me a weird reaction. And see, this is why I don't like MLM. Is I'm just not a salesperson. All that stuff comes from not doing this right. So you want to establish where you're at, and this really depends on the person. Are they ready to hear about your company, product, or service? Or do they need developing? Do you need to develop them into something? Now, I want to give you a couple examples in my own company where I determine whether I need to do this. And earlier on, I talked about the allergy example. Now, that's somebody that needs developing. That's somebody where I need to give them some information. I need to make sure they have an understanding in how nutrition can help their allergies before I introduce them to my company, product, and service. Now, what if I'm talking to somebody, and I have this happen all the time. I was at yoga a couple months ago. Somebody behind the desk asked me what I did. I told them I actually sell nutrition products. She asked me, like, well, what do you mean? What do you sell? And I said, vitamin supplements. I tailor certain nutrition programs for different people based on their workouts, their health needs, and that sort of thing. And she said, I'm actually looking for a really good vitamin. The one I have really isn't working for me really well, and I have a specific illness that I'm concerned about that I know nutrition helps. Would you like to talk? And I said, sure. Now, obviously, I don't need to develop that person. So when I'm determining the next step in this connection, I'm going straight to the introduce step because I'm going to introduce her to my company. I'm going to show her what products I have that can help her, and I'm going to tell her why my company is different from some of the things that she may have seen out there. One last thing I'll talk about, you're probably going through this and going, gosh, this seems like a lot to remember or really confusing. And what I'm going to tell you is actually we have a course where we call it your personal endorsement, and we have one for product or service, and we have one for the business, the company side, selling the business side of what you do in MLM. And basically what it is it goes through these steps and actually tells you what to say at every step of this communication process. So you know where you're at when you're doing it, you know what to say, and then as you get good at this, you'll actually use this training to guide you through that as you follow along of the predetermined process we've come up for you, because we know you're new at this, but eventually you'll be making your own someday as you get good at this.